Yo, what's up, you bunch of golf addicts and degenerates? My name is Joe Idoni at Tour Picks on Twitter, coming to you right now on behalf of the Tour Junkies. And we're going to do a little live golf preview and give out some picks to win for the Singapore event, which takes place this coming week. If you haven't subscribed to the Nut Hut, you can get all my matchup picks. The heavy petting email is already out. Chalk Bomb comes out tomorrow for the Mexico Open. There's actually a good bunch of new contributors who have started to produce additional content. Welcome into the TJ team. So we're proud to have them alongside. I know DB and Pat have been working extremely hard behind the scenes to sort of build up this team feel, and everything seems to be really coming together. I'm proud to be able to present this segment to you, of course, brought to you by Tour Junkies. Let's get into what happened last week a little bit at LIV. I want to do a little recap on the Adelaide event. Obviously well attended, their biggest and most high profile event that they've had yet by almost any degree of sort of reasonability when viewing it, right? Look, clearly everyone has their own side of the debate in terms of the level of success. Like, it's not Phoenix. It's also not the Zurich to me. But it looked pretty fun, right? That everyone seemed to be having a good time. Is this something that I believe is sustainable week in and week out? No, right? At some point, you're really going to have to rely on the competition aspect of it. But look, I think Australia showed out in big ways. You could really tell genuinely how excited the people and the fans were to see some of the world's best come to their event. The course, we talked about it last week on the preview, was hardly a professional tour caliber golf course, right? It was a composite of two courses there, neither of which tipped out to over 6,400 yards. It wasn't about the test wasn't the course, though. The test was the show, and they gave quite a spectacle, obviously highlighted by the hole-in-one by Chase. But I think week in and week out, there were large crowds, there were rowdy crowds, there was music playing. This is the type, like, call it a circus if you want, but this is the type of atmosphere that I think that they were looking for and that they were looking to give a difference in the viewing experience for professional golf fans. I think Australia was the perfect place for them to do this. The people there were thirsty for a professional golf tournament and the world's best to come and play in front of them, where they could go and watch this type of experience. And to them, someone who never gets the opportunity to do so, unlike many of us over here, it was less about the political affiliations of the group that was bringing them the event. It was more just about the players and about the golf. And that's kind of how I've tried to approach this thing. It's how the Tour Junkies have agreed to approach this thing too. It's like, look, we cover golf regardless of how we feel about where the money comes from, regardless of how we feel about some of the underlying sport washing aspects that are certainly prevalent and there. We're here to cover the golf aspect of it, and that's what I'm sort of here to do. Now, I don't care how easy the course was. 62 and 62 is impressive. Taylor Gooch really put on quite a show. The other part of it was sort of, guys chugging beers out of Air Jordans, and that's only going to get you so much enticement and noticeability for so long before it becomes corny. Eventually it's going to have to, like, you can't replicate what you just did in Adelaide in Tulsa, right? It's just not going to happen. So ultimately, I think the hard part of them is not losing sight of the competition aspect and making that what is sort of the backbone of the organization as a whole. This was obviously fun, and the concept is working to a degree for them, but I think you ultimately want to build a league based on competition, not based on the show that's around the competition. So I think that's one of the hurdles that they're going to have to do. But let's recap kind of what we saw. Obviously 62, and then kind of held on for dear life. But you go 10 under the first 2 days in a 3-day event, you're in pretty good shape. And that's exactly what Taylor Gooch was able to do. His first win, you could really kind of see some positive signs from some of the numbers at the Masters for Taylor. He was one of the more high profile guys when he first joined in terms of world ranking. He had really started his ascension. He had won a fall swing event. So he was really kind of one of the surprising young names, but paid it off, right? He took the money and got 4 million once again for winning this event down there. Obviously, their premier event that they've had thus far. So, congratulations to Taylor on sort of capturing that win. Some other notes that I had from last week that I just wanted to touch on. Obviously, the team portion of it was won by the Four Aces team. Reed, DJ, and Uline went off on Sunday. They shot a combined 18 under. I believe Reed was 7 under, Uline 6 under, DJ 5 under. They surpassed the Range Goats. God, it still feels kind of crazy just saying the team names, but they were able to take home the team portion of it. Notable movers, Honorbond shot 65 to finish solo second. Tringale had his best performance in a tie for third. Cam Smith, obviously the hometown pressure was on him, and he had some looming injury concerns. So it was nice to see him play well and finish it tied for third as well. DJ was really my pick last week, and the guy drove it really well. I looked at some of the numbers from the final round, which was, I guess maybe not Sunday here, but Sunday there. The final round of the event last week, averaged 340 yards off the tee. And this is a course where initially in the week they had talked about just being positional and the importance of fairways. It was reckless abandon with the driver on Sunday, and it really kind of paid off. Paul Casey on Sunday hit 18 out of 18 greens, was perfect in terms of greens in regulation. And the low man of the day was Jason Kokrak. 9 birdies, birdied half the holes that he played on Sunday for a closing round 65. All right, so that kind of puts a bow on Adelaide a little bit. And this is the first time we've really had a 1 week turn in terms of another event in another country. We've got Sentosa Island, which is in Singapore, and the Serapong is the name of the golf course. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. Unbelievable. Like, look at some of the photos on this. Just Google the Serapong in Sentosa Island, Singapore, and you will see some of the coolest looking aerials that you've ever seen of a golf course. Golf Digest this past year had it ranked 55th in terms of the world's greatest courses. Was also awarded Asia's best golf course in 2022. It has hosted the Singapore Open in a couple different windows. So from 2005 to 2012, and then it picked back up in 2016 to the present. It normally plays as a 6,700 yard par 72, but this week LIV has posted the yardage as a par 71 for 7,406 yards. So clearly they've taken one of those par 5s, knocked like 300 yards off the tips there and changed it to a 7, which is kind of strange to me, but that's what they elected to do. So we're going with par 71, 7,406. The scorecard should be out later this week, but early start time in Singapore. That's why we wanted to get this show out early as well versus posting like Wednesday night. It's pretty close to tee time. Been through a number of renovations. The latest group from like 2006 all the way to 2020 made the greens much larger, some rerouting of a few holes, added some elements in additional bunkering. They've got kind of these like scraped away bunkers, which is pretty unique and cool looking. Zoysia grass fairways throughout was added. So uniquely, like, this is one of the only carbon neutral, and I don't really know what that means, so bear with me here, but carbon neutral golf courses in the world. The only one. All the water is recycled. There is absolutely zero plastic on the course. They have made huge strides to be like this green friendly golf course, and the resort itself is pretty sick. It is a rather resorty-esque course in the sense where you're going to get a lot of great views along the water. You're going to get these wide landscaping sort of fairway and landing areas. But outside of that, on a lot of holes, you've got water on both sides. It's sort of crafted to feel like it kind of weaves through the water there in many instances. Holes 4 through 7 are the toughest on the card. They call that the dragon's tail of the course, which if you look at it from some of the aerial views, you will notice those holes kind of mimic that image from over top, which is kind of cool. Look, it's the best course in Asia rated by Golf Digest. It's right on the borderline of top 50 in the world. It's a nice stop for them. I don't think they're going to get the crowds that they got in Australia. I don't know when the TV coverage windows are going to exactly be, so I'm not sure it's going to get as much of an audience from a app and CW and streaming perspective. But they've built this sort of in the bulk of their season. They've got Tulsa in a couple weeks coming up before the PGA Championship. So this is really they've got to hunker down. They've got to complete their travel. And if they want to position themselves as this global golf tour, they've got to be in Singapore. They've got to be in Asia. They've got to be in Australia. So that's where they're rounding out before they come back to the U.S. for Tulsa before we get to, sending some of these guys up there to Oak Hill. All right. Let's look at some picks. Let's make some bets this week for LIV Singapore. I've got the odds board up here. So the top of the board, Cameron Smith quickly back to the favorite in a LIV golf event is now 11-1. Brooks is right behind him at 12-1. DJ 14, Reed 14, Neiman 16, Gooch 16, Answer 18-1. Those are all the guys sub 20-1 on your odds board this week. It's probably not going to be a huge surprise who I have the most interest in. I was actually hoping for like a 16-1 on Cam. Surprised relatively to see him the favorite. DJ's that dude. 14-1 on Dustin Johnson. I'm back on it just like I was last week. Playing him again. He's won 3 out of 12 LIV golf tournaments. He's winning 25% of the tournaments. Great positive signs from last week, which I'll get into in just a moment. But this is just a no-brainer in terms of odds value for me. I think it's the best on the entire board. The guy's won, like I mentioned, 1 out of every 4 tournaments, and you're getting him 14-1 at a course that should set up to many of his strengths. Even if it's 7,500 yards, it's got room off the tee. He's the best player. He's the best player on LIV. Like, I love Cam. I love Brooks. You guys know this. DJ's that dude, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to play him. He's still the best player they have on the tour. I mentioned the pop in the bat last week, averaging 340 off the tee, but it's not just that. He's hitting a lot of fairways now with the driver. He got it figured out. Second in the field in terms of overall driving distance for the week last week on the whole, but 4th in fairways hit. That's impressive stuff for Dustin Johnson. He didn't hit a ton of... So he lacked a little bit in greens and regulation where he got in trouble. He made 1 fewer birdie than Taylor Gooch, keep in mind, last week. But what happened was he missed a couple of greens in the wrong spot and had some ill-advised boxes or bogeys and double bogeys on the scorecard that ultimately killed him. 14-1. I'm happy to go back at this number as long as they continue to post it and I see a decency of form from Dustin Johnson, especially in regards to what we saw last week off the tee. I'm going right to 14-1 every single time. He should be 8-1. He should be 8-1 and the favorite in the field. 14-1. Take that to the bank. Book it. Gooch, not ready to go back to back. I thought a lot about Answer, man. I've been betting Abe. This feels maybe not the right time to jump off, but I do think the course is going to play relatively long. The Zoysia is going to play relatively soft. And I don't know, just not all the strengths line up there for me. He was awesome last week in driving the ball. He was awesome in greens and regulation. He just didn't really hole any putts. But instead of going there at 18-1, right after that, you've got this interesting group to me. Mito, Uline, Howe, Lahiri, Wolf, Casey. I wanted a good number on Anirban. Didn't get it. He tends to carry form because when Anirban can kind of get it rolling, he continues that. We saw it with the run through Florida on the PGA Tour schedule. Peter Uline continues to impress. Mito didn't have a great week last week, but has been pretty solid. I don't get these numbers in the people betting Matt Wolf. He was awful last week. One of the worst in the field in the greens. Finished like, I don't know, 46th or something. And he's just been bad. I'm not there yet, but there is another smash guy. We'll talk about him later. But Paul Casey, we're in 28-1 on Paul Casey. That is a number over at, excuse me, let me just pull up the book here. So that's at Bet365. There are other offshores out there with the 28 to 1 as well. Um, I think Paul in general was unfortunately sort of propelled to live, I believe, in a sense by injury. Like we saw with some guys, frankly. We kind of saw it with Brooks where there were maybe some question marks regarding the rehab and how quickly and how successfully they were going to be able to return after injuries, and those overlying concerns about their future. They decided to cash in and take the check. And look, it is what it is. It's hard to put yourself in that position where you've played an entire career and now you're able to sort of cash that check in the end of it, get the retirement fund ready, still play some competitive golf. It's hard to really fault him for taking it, especially when he was dealing with those injuries. He was able to basically make money off what he had already done. That said, he's come back into decent form. The last tournament we actually have strokes gain data from Paul Casey was at the Open Championship, where he gained 2 off the tee and 3 on approach, was relatively solid there. I spoke earlier about the positivity of going 100% in greens and regulation on the final day of LIV Golf Adelaide, and those aren't very big greens. So that's quite an accomplishment in terms of what he did. The irons are in good form. 39th place finish when hitting 18 greens is something that is a little troubling to me, of course, but you're getting 28 to 1, I believe, because of it. Had he done the same thing statistically and was able to finish inside the top 15, I think we'd see him around like the Pereira numbers in that 20 to 1 range. Uh, Putted horrible last week, right? It happens. These greens are sort of unique. They're very different. They're very undulating. They're large in size. I'm hoping that he can be able to navigate them a little bit better than he had last week. And if you're sort of looking at a guy who's been knocking at the door on LIV, who's one of the names you expected to potentially have success here, but has not come to fruition yet, I think look no further than Paul Casey. 6 finishes, T6 or better, in 10 starts on the LIV Tour. 6 finishes, T6 or better, in 10 starts on the LIV Tour. That's some solid work there. Also noteworthy, has positive history at the Singapore Open held at this golf course in 3 appearances at Sentosa Golf Club. He has shot a combined 38 under par during those 3 tournaments, only 1 single round over par during that span, and the finishes were a T16, a T10, and a runner-up. So very solid course history here. I believe he's building on some stuff with the iron play, and hopefully we can get a positive week or an even week, at least with the putter. Look, Gooch won last week like 28th in putting. He was so good tee to green that the putting didn't matter. And I think that that's the route you're hoping for out of Paul Casey. Hit all the fairways, still long enough off the tee, and just pound greens into oblivion. 28 to 1. Paul Casey's the second bet on the card. As we sort of scroll down here, Burmeister, Ortiz, Steele, Varner, sort of all in this low to mid 30 range. The guy for me is, it is showing 35 to 1 here, but there are 40 to 1s available, and that's what I took. Knock, knock, knocking on Liv's door. Jason Kokrak's doing it. Led in Mike Kober or Tucson. He led in one of the opening events of the season for quite a while through the first round and partially through the second. Had a real low one in Orlando as well. Played reasonably well in February, actually, in a couple of Asian tour events. So he has some familiarity with the region. As soon as 2 months ago, played 2 events. 11th last week in terms of the finishing position over in Australia, despite being in the bottom half of the field in total putts. I think so Phil led the field in putting last week. unbelievable performance, had like 76 putts for the week. Kokrak had 14 more putts than Phil and was able to somehow beat him. So his tee to green game has been really solid. He was third in terms of greens and reg hit last week at Adelaide. So the numbers have always they've just been hovering for Kokrak. I think 40 to 1 is a little bit of a sweet spot. That's what we hit Brooks at a couple of weeks ago. These events are we're still finding the best avenue, and I'd be remiss to mention if I have my strategy totally ironed out. I've hit a winner at 40 to 1 in one of the 4 events this season. I'm looking to kind of go with the same thing and take names, take guys who have signs, take guys who have experience or was able to recently play in a major championship. And look, if they can put 1 or 2 low rounds together, that's good enough. We saw it out of Taylor Gooch last week. 2 low rounds and hold on for dear life. I think that's Jason Kokrat's path. I think not being 72 holes with some of his inconsistency could be a benefit to someone like Kokrak. 40 to 1, that's my third bet on the card. So to recap, DJ 14 to 1, Paul Casey 28 to 1, Jason Kokrak 40 to 1. Those are my 3 bets for LIV Golf Singapore. I hope that you guys enjoy it. If you're able to catch some of the coverage, I'm not sure what exactly the time frame is looking like for those of us like me on the East Coast, but I'm sure you're going to see some beautiful sights there. The coverage has actually been quite good. I like the announcers. I like the lack of commercials. I like the amount of golf shots that we see. Be sure to stay tuned to the Tour Junkies YouTube channel for more videos this week coming out. The boys, DB and Pat, already got the Mexico Open picks video out, the DraftKings video out. New guy, Nate Dog has got a little course preview out over there as well. Stay tuned to the emails. Make sure to hop in the Nut Hut if you want more exclusive content from the Tour Junkies. On behalf of them, this is Tour Picks. I'm out of here. Best of luck. Go cash you a winner at LIV over in Singapore. Peace.